You know, Billy Maines used to always try to kiss me. He knew that it would
Well, in
embarrass
honor
me.
of Billy Maines.
Wow, now I've totally lost my train of thought. So what I was going to tell you about tonight is a couple of weeks after Pulse, I was addressing the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Indianapolis. And I wasn't going to go, but they asked me to come up to thank the mayors that had all participated. And I must have got 300 or so emails or voicemails or text messages, and I didn't have a chance to call any of them back, except one. I called Rudy Giuliani back because I figured if anybody could give me some advice, it was really Giuliani. But that isn't the point of the story. The point of the story is the program that I was on. So there were 4 participants, and it was the Dalai Lama, Madonna, Hillary Clinton, and me. So can you imagine that that's your program? But now I just one-upped it. I just spoke after the ringmaster of the Barnum and Bailey Ringling's Brothers Circus. And to boot, he's an opera singer. How about that? That's pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to talk on some leadership things, but I was just sitting there thinking about, usually, I've actually never given a speech on leadership, but I do give a lot of speeches to middle schoolers or Boy Scouts and graduation speeches. And one of the things that I talk about, not in leadership, but for success, is to do the very best you can do at whatever it is you're doing at the time. Because you never know what somebody is going to think when they see you doing whatever it is you're doing, whether it's sweeping up the stage and you just swept it up the best that anybody has ever swept this stage up, or it's some other task that will open a window or a door for you to be able to move on to something else that you might not have had that opportunity if somebody didn't think, man, that person really applies himself to the task that he's doing. Okay, I do have 4 or 5 leadership principles for you, so I'm going to talk about some individual principles, and then I'll talk about some organizational principles. So the first one is believe in yourself and know yourself. So believe in yourself, because if you don't believe in yourself, there's nobody else that's going to believe in you, right? So I grew up in Kissimmee. I was going to write Kissimmee down. How the heck did he get Prague, by the way? I have no idea. I'm not even sure I spelled Prague right, and he still got Prague. But I was born here in Orlando and grew up in Kissimmee, and my first job growing up was, anybody know? I know some people know. Andre was my first job. You're from Kissimmee too. It was shoveling manure out of the back of a cattle truck. My dad was a long-haul cattle trucker. So when you go from Florida to Texas hauling a bunch of cattle, guess what the trailer looks like when it comes back to Florida? And guess what? Somebody has to clean it out. So that was my first job growing up. And we didn't know it at the time. We were a poor household. We thought we were rich, but turns out we weren't. But so I came from that climate. But growing up, I knew I wanted to go to an Ivy League school. And I believed in myself that I could get somehow to the Ivy Leagues, and I thought I'd go to Harvard. Brown was a cool school to go to when it came time to graduate. And I did get into Brown, and I was from a poor family, and the first 2 years I was at Brown, it was the most expensive school in the country. So it turned out that I got enough financial aid and scholarship that I could go to Brown cheaper than I could go to the University of Florida, and came out with $4,500 worth of debt. So believing in myself, even though some of my teachers thought and told me, well, maybe you should go closer to home, maybe you should go to Florida, but believing in myself and going to an Ivy League school opened up my whole world, because I don't know how many of you know Kissimmee back in the 70s, but we only had 3 TV stations, and that was not bringing the world to you. So it opened up my world to the experiences that I've been able to encounter since then. And then the second part of that is knowing yourself. So when I say know yourself, it's knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses. So in an organization, if you know what your strengths are and you know what your weaknesses are, you can put people around you that have the strengths that you don't have. But the other part of that is working on your weaknesses. And I'm going to play off Jonathan the Ringmaster's comments, because in 1992, when I was 32, I was elected to the state Senate. And I remember my first speech on the Senate floor. It was kind of like this. I couldn't get the mic close enough to my mouth because I was so scared. Now I know it's about my ego. I didn't know it then. I just thought I was scared. But I have taught myself to be able to publicly speak. So you should take an assessment of what are the best things you do, what are your strengths, because you ought to play to those, but then what are your weaknesses and can you work on them? And have you ever heard the term born leader? Right? She's a born leader, he's a born leader. Do you believe that? Yes. Some people are, maybe. I don't know. I think you can teach yourself and learn to be a leader. And every person in this room I know is a leader, but everybody in this room can improve on their leadership skills. And I've read a ton of books on leadership, I can tell you that. And a lot of people will say I'm a natural leader, but I don't believe that for a second. I think I've learned leadership skills and it's progressing from one thing to the next. So if you're concerned about leadership, you can learn those skills to lead, but you can't be afraid of failure. That's another leadership principle. You have to be willing to take risks. You can't be the person that's going to say, well, let's do that. I think we should do that in 6 months. Or now's not the right time to do that. You have to balance the risk and you have to absolutely be not afraid to fail. Is there anybody in here who has not failed at something? I mean, I failed in some pretty big ways in my lifetime, really. I've been indicted, right? So that's a pretty big failure, and yet I'm standing here with 70%, 75, 80% approval ratings. I can tell you when I was indicted, it was about 10%, but we persevered, and that didn't end up being a failure. That ended up being a learning experience. So another leadership aspect, I think, is being agile and adaptable. So there are a lot of things that you can control, right, in your little sphere. But there's a lot of things that you can't control. I can't control what Donald Trump is going to tweet out later this morning. Or maybe he's probably already tweeted something out. That's probably going to affect my day and affect what I'm doing in the city of Orlando in some way or another. We're trying to create the most diverse, diversity-friendly, equality-friendly, fairness-friendly city, and he's trying to turn us the other way. But we have to adapt to that, and we have to do what we're going to do. So being adaptable is a very important thing. Okay, maybe the most important thing, I think, is persistence. Having a sustained effort toward a goal that you have, and I can tell you story after story after story about persistence. I failed 3 times trying to get legislation passed to do Sunrail, but we got it done. And a lot of people would have quit after the second one. It took, I don't know how long to get the Performing Arts Center out of the ground because of the economy, but we were persistent about that. And the opposite of persistence is what? Quitting. And nobody, I can promise you this, nobody follows a quitter. Because if you're going to quit on them while they're doing everything in their power to make you successful, they're never, ever going to follow you again. So being persistent, once you set that goal up there, now you might have to change the GPS, you might have to change the route a little bit when you figure out that you've run into a roadblock, but that doesn't mean you can't find your way around that roadblock. So we've got knowing yourself, being agile, being flexible. Let's see, being a risk taker, being persistent, not being afraid to fail. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple organizational things, and I don't remember what they are, so I'm going to take a quick peek. Take a quick break. Okay, these are really important. Having and establishing credibility. Doing what you say, saying what you're going to do, and then actually doing that. I think there's no more important thing for a leader than having credibility. People believing that when you say we're going to go build an arts center, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go build an arts center, or if we're going to build Sunrail, or if we're going to end homelessness in our community, they know that you mean that, and it's not just lip service as you're doing that. And I can't tell you how much that helped me on June the 12th. Over a period of 13, 14 years, I think I had built up credibility with our community. So when we came out after the killer had been downed and had to explain to the community what happened, I don't think anybody doubted what I told them had happened. And I was able to say to people, we're not going to be defined by the hate-filled act of this demented killer. We're going to be defined by how we respond. And we're going to respond with love and compassion and unity. And if you didn't have that credibility, it's like, well, is Buddy going to respond in that way? And I think most people knew that, yeah, I was going to respond in that way. And then, I have a full 15 minutes, Andre?
Yeah, as long as you want.
Okay. I was just waiting for when the buzzer was going to go off. I heard that going off on Jonathan. Okay. So, I think that we have one of the best city organizations in the entire country. Lori Harris is a great example of that. And when you're leading an organization of any size, probably the most important thing you can do is hire the right people and put the right people in the right places. And that's part of knowing your strengths and your weaknesses and surrounding you with the people that can help you realize your strengths, but more importantly, can offset your weaknesses. And Lori has such passion for the issues of homelessness. That's another thing, is hire people that have a passion for what it is they do, and then empower them to use their talents. And if I have any leadership attribute at all, I am not scared to let talented people use their talent to make me look good, right? I mean, we're doing all this stuff on homelessness, or we're doing it. Chris Castro, Chris comes to some of these, I think. Another great example. Okay, you know we're the most sustainable city in the Southeast United States, America, right? Okay, Atlanta might be able to argue with us about that a little bit, but nobody else can. But one of the reasons is 10 years ago, I turned my environmental team loose and just said, you guys go do whatever it is it takes for us to be the most sustainable. They come back with some of the nuttiest out there ideas you could even believe, but they're so talented, and we're not afraid to take a chance and push the envelope on saying that we'll be on clean energy in the city by 2030 and city government, and by 2050 be on sustainable clean energy for the city as a whole. So that's a great goal to put out there, and we will be, by the way. And the other thing in our organization that think that we have instilled is nobody's afraid to take that risk and go out there, because what I like to tell my staff is I believe we've created a culture that 95% of the time the people that are in a decision-making position would make the same decision that I've made. And that's because I present a clear vision to people. I tell my staff what I want to get done. I don't tell them how to get it done. They got to go figure that out, and they're more talented, especially if it's IT or something like that. If I say I want to have a system that does this, there's no way on earth I'm going to figure out how to create that system. But I have really good people that can do that. But I like to tell my staff that 95% of the time, I think you'd make the same decision that I would make. But the other 5%, when you make exactly the opposite decision that I would make, I'm going to support you all the way. You don't have to worry about me second guessing the decision that you made. And that's critically important, that you empower the people that are in your organization and that you're not second guessing. But you have to give them a clear vision. It's not their fault if they make the wrong decision, if they have no idea what it was that you would do in that situation, right? I have no idea what the mayor would say when asked that question, but if they say, oh, I know Buddy would want to do this, then they're going to make the right decision. And the thing about having good people in your organization and being flexible and adaptable, when Pulse occurred, a large percentage of our city staff were thrust into jobs that they had never, ever envisioned. And I like to say that so many of them were traveling so far outside of their lane that they couldn't see the center line of the road that they were traveling in. But every one of them stepped up, created the Orlando United Assistance Center and helped over 900 individuals that came through there, having no playbook or anything like that. Firefighters stepped up, police officers stepped up in every way, but the firefighters and police officers were trained to do what they did, right? The staff that stepped in and did some of the other things weren't trained at that. They were just good at doing what they needed to do, and I'm so appreciative of that. Well, I am going to close right there. Does anybody remember any of those principles at all? You're still thinking about the ringmaster and whether he can sing opera or not. And hey, Jonathan, I guarantee you my hair was prettier than your hair when I was 21 years old. A lot of people here have seen my hair, and I had the biggest afro in Osceola County. It made Bernie on Route 222 sweat just thinking about it. Or Lamont on Sanford and Son. Yeah, I had the best one going, so we'll compare notes sometime. Andre and John, thank you for inviting me here tonight. I appreciate it. And let me just say, all of you that are here tonight, I appreciate the work that our not-for-profits do in our community. So much of the work that is done by your individual organizations are what make Orlando great, what gives us a sense of who we are. And I think we're one of the great communities anywhere, and it's shown through on June the 12th, because you can't create that on June the 12th, and it's been that way every single day. And if anything was a positive note out of June the 12th, it's the whole world knows what type of community we are now. Thank you so much.
Ah!